Marcus was born on the 25th of April 1932 in Tullamore, in County Offaly, just west of Dublin. He was the third child of Joseph Molony and Alice Crowe. We welcome today three of his brothers who've come across to celebrate the service with us. Father Raymond, who's officiating at the Mass, Joseph and Vincent, and more members of their family are here. He has a brother called Basil, who unfortunately couldn't make it over from California. He had two other sibs, John, his elder brother, and Philomena, his youngest sister, who unfortunately both died a few years back. Marcus's father, Joseph, was a family doctor in Thomastown, in County Kilkenny, in Ireland. As a child, his father used to call him by the nickname Solomon. I can find out of no one why, but one guesses that he had a wise disposition even at that early age. It is in Thomastown, in Malhouse, where Marcus spent most of his younger years, until he went to a secondary school as a boarder in Rockwood College in Tipperary. After Rockwood College, Marcus went to medical school at the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin. It was there that he met Pauline. He apparently met her at a university dance, and yes, we are amazed that they did have university dances in those days. It surprised us even more, as we had never associated Marcus with the disco scene. He led an active life, an active student life, and was president of the Students' Union for a year, another fact that surprises those who know him. He might explain why Pauline managed to do so much better than him in his university exams, or maybe, as he always said himself, she was simply cleverer than him. He was forever a brilliant storyteller, and so many people I've spoken to remind me of this aspect of him. Everybody enjoyed his yarns, making excellent company, as many of you will remember. Even as a medical student and junior doctor, I still hear of how he used to entertain patients and colleagues alike with his stories and jokes, even at the bedside. He used to tell me the antics that the Dublin students got up to. I was never sure whether they were really other students or himself. One particular story particularly sticks in my mind. During his time at the university, Dublin Council introduced pedestrian crossings in the city centre. These were like our zebra crossings, complete with black and white stripes and the metal studs on either side of the crossing. This was a newfangled invention for Dublin in those days. Anyway, one lunchtime, a group of students, dressed up as council workmen, proceeded to polish and clean the square metal studs, blocking the traffic. The local police, the Garda, turned up and took this activity at face value and proceeded to block and redirect all the traffic. He told me that some of the students got arrested, but in court, as ever, the magistrate simply dismissed the case on the basis that, well, they're medical students. He always denied that he was one of those students involved, but I've always had my suspicions. He qualified finally in 1955. After qualification, Marcus, along with many other of his hospital colleagues, declined the offer of house jobs in hospitals attached to the medical school. This was quite upsetting to the chiefs, who got everybody earmarked to take their houseman's post, and all of them disappeared off to other parts of the world. Marcus's first job as a doctor was 1 year spent in the Mercy Hospital in Timken, Ohio. After that year, he returned to Dublin very briefly, before flying off again to the States to work for another year in the famous Cleveland Clinic, also in Ohio. Another few months he spent working in Vienna. I'm not really quite sure how he managed that. Languages, despite his efforts, were never his forte, and I doubt they spoke much English in those days. He returned to Dublin after a few months in Vienna to settle down into a local job in the Richmond Hospital and to be with Pauline. They married on the 13th of September 1958 in Beechwood Avenue in Dublin, in her final year at medical school. And I was born in July the following year. It's okay, I've worked the dates out. After she qualified, they moved to Cardiff, where he took up general practice in this country as an assistant. Kevin was born there in 1960. After that, they moved to Kidderminster, where he became a junior partner. I think in those days the junior partners were very junior, except that they did all the work. And he spent 3 years there, moving between two houses. Damien arrived in January at the end of his time in Kidderminster. Pauline's parents retired at that stage in the early 60s and decided to move to Surrey. And Marcus and Pauline followed them, applying for a single-handed practice to replace the local GP, Dr. McIntosh, who had retired. They were successful in their application amongst many candidates and started in the practice in Surrey on the 1st of August 1965. The first surgery they used was in Homewood Road on the new estate that had been built. A small, semi-detached house, very small semi-detached house, number 1 at the top of the road. The surgery occupied the downstairs rooms, and the family all lived in the 3 small bedrooms upstairs. Quite a daunting prospect with 3 small children at that stage. Luckily, Alf and Frida, Pauline's parents, lived close by in Surrey and could help out. After a few months, they moved to Bretlands Lane, and from there, bought some land in Westphere, building their family home, Winterfold House, which was completed in 1968. And they lived there right up until Marcus died. During his time at Surrey, he had several clinical assistant posts. He was pleased when he was promoted up to the grand heights of hospital practitioner grade. I suspect his main pleasure was because in those days, unlike clinical assistant posts, the HPG grade was pensionable, and clinical assistant posts weren't. He worked together with her, and they made a good team, a very synergistic relationship in practice, both medically and business-wise. He developed medical, surgical, and paediatric skills on his travels around the world, and she focused on the psychiatric, gynecology, and the psychosocial issues patients brought up. He worked hard. For many years, he worked in the Accident Emergency Centre on a Saturday night, although, as he regaled to me many times over the following years, he regretted the time he missed with his family at weekends. He seemed very pleased, in his quiet way, when I joined the practice in 1987 to carry on the 3rd generation of the family trade. He retired in 1992, but carried on working, doing locums for several years. He did several locums for our practice, including, for instance, covering Sue's maternity leave, my brother's wife's and my business partner's maternity leave when she had James and Charlotte. And then he used to go up and work in Bermondsey, of all places, staying in his London home in Kennington.